Joining me now, Biden campaign senior advisor Symone Sanders, and we begin the conversation there. We heard from Vice President Biden, but he seemed to cite some polls that I haven't seen very much. I mean, in fairness, the campaign is treading a bit of water nationally, and two straight polls in Iowa have you in fourth. What do you say to the Democratic hand-wringers and worrywarts in New York and in Washington, which is mostly where this chatter comes from, who look at the Bloomberg candidacy as this sort of in case of emergency type of situation?
Well, thank you for having me today, Chuck. Look, I would say to those folks, you have to look and listen to the voters across America. I believe Vice President Biden was right. We enjoy a very broad coalition of support. He was on the ground to lots of enthusiasm in New Hampshire today as he filed for the first in the nation primary. So we're not concerned. We have said from the beginning that this was going to be a fight for the nomination. I don't think folks believed us, Chuck. So when the polls get tight, people get concerned, but it's always going to be a fight. And it can't be a fight if the polls aren't tight. So we are in this for the long haul. We have long since said that this race is going to go well into Super Tuesday and beyond. So we're ready for this. We have the resources. And, we welcome Michael Bloomberg to the race.
Are you sure you have the resources? I mean, you had $9 million cash on hand. Michael Bloomberg might spend that every week between now and the Milwaukee convention. And he's coming right for the same group of voters that you guys are targeting. Are you worried it's going to dilute that lane, if you will, and make it even easier for Elizabeth Warren?
Well, Chuck, if the voters that you are referring to are black voters, white voters, Latino voters, Asian American, Pacific Island voters, folks that are working people of all backgrounds, men and women, that's our coalition. So I'm not sure who the pundits think our coalition is, but you have to be able to build a broad coalition that reflects the depth and breadth of the American people in order to win this primary and to beat Donald Trump. We're the only candidate in this race, anyone that's thinking about getting into this race, and definitely anybody that's in it right now that has demonstrated they have the ability to build that coalition. And to your question about our resources, yes, Chuck, we have the resources that we need. We raised $5.3 million online just in October. So we're feeling good. We know it's going to be a tight race, but we're in this thing to win it.
Is there an upside to Bloomberg getting in overall for the party or for your candidacy?
Well, Chuck, I'm going to leave that to the pundits to pontificate about. But what I'll say is this, that the American people, especially voters in this Democratic presidential primary, they are dealing with a lot right now. I know Washington, D.C. and New York like to talk about impeachment hearings and the latest thing Donald Trump tweeted today. And that's part of it. But folks are dealing with real issues when it comes to health care. People want to know what you're going to do to help them put more money in their pockets, to help them put more food on the table. What are we going to do about jobs in America? What are we doing for labor, for unions? And those are the things that we are out there talking about on the campaign trail. Healthcare, very salient point. We hope, I'm just guessing that that's going to come up in the next debate. And Vice President Biden has been clear about his plan, Biden Care for America, that will lower costs across the board, lower drug costs, and introduce more choice. Now, some other folks in this race haven't been clear about what their plan is and haven't been straight in how to pay for it. Those are the kind of conversations folks want to have on the campaign trail. So if Michael Bloomberg wants to have that conversation, Chuck, come on in.
Yeah. Well, speaking of health care, you called it Biden Care. Everybody calls a version of Obamacare and expanding it a different name. But is that the lesson out of Kentucky that you hope Democrats take away, that the lesson here is defend Obamacare and expand it and build on it, don't try to scrap it?
I would say that the numbers bore that out, Chuck, and not just for Kentucky, for places across America. Also in Virginia, where Democrats are in charge of the House, the Senate, and the governor's mansion. Look, I think people forget about 2018. We just had an election last week, but people forget about 2018 and go right back to 2016. In 2018, Democrats won back the House by ferociously defending Obamacare and planning to build on it. They didn't win back the House by saying we're going to tear down this system and start all over. And so we are running to ferociously defend Obamacare from any Democrat or Republican that threats to dismantle the most monumental health care legislation in a generation. And let's not forget, Chuck, right now, open enrollment is available right now. But right now, Donald Trump and his administration are in court trying to dismantle and block access for care for so many people. So this isn't a game. This isn't a theoretical exercise. This is very real for so many many people across the country, and Joe Biden has a plan to get it done.
Symone Sanders of the Biden campaign, thanks for coming on and sharing your views. Always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Good to see you.
Now I want to check in with Markos Moulitsas, founder of the Daily Kos, and a man who has his finger on the pulse of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. So, Markos, there's an interesting debate that I've already heard have among progressives, which is, and in fact, even among some that are skeptical of Elizabeth Warren, that says Michael Bloomberg is a gift to Elizabeth Warren. What do you think of that analysis?
It's not wrong, I don't think, and it's not just Warren, but also Bernie Sanders.
Explain why. Articulate why that is because plenty of progressives and frankly even some of the establishment wing believe this. But explain the rationale.
The rationale is that you have two candidates, and Warren is the leading one of the two right now, who are basically built an entire narrative about the capricious and unearned influence that billionaires have on our economy. And here's somebody, a white male, who just stomps in thinking that he knows better than anybody else. And the only reason we're even talking about him is because he's a billionaire. So he exemplifies the argument about the wealthy having too much influence, and he's going to come in, he's going to spend millions of dollars a day, like you just said, and he's going to once again sort of remind people why a wealth tax is such a good idea. So I don't think he actually has any impact as far as the numbers are concerned. He's not going to get any real support in the polls. His 20 billionaire buddies aren't going to be enough to give him anything real tangible as far as support is, but he's going to be a great foil to run against when your argument is that the wealthy have too much influence.
All right. I think, does he at all get credit for being an elected official for as long as he has? Because you went for billionaire. To me, there's a difference between Steyer and Bloomberg, right? Where Bloomberg is been an elected official and a billionaire. Steyer, he hadn't really done anything since then. I'm just curious if you at all are concerned about the network of mayors that Bloomberg has put together that could create a formidable national organization.
No, even the idea that an endorsement means anything these days is kind of is outdated in the era of social media, where everybody's making their own decisions and making their own connections directly with candidates. So who cares who he gets? And now, being a Republican mayor maybe would have been really helpful if you ran in a Republican primary. But the fact is that if he wants to remind people that he wasn't a Democrat when he was an elected official and actually ran against Democrats when he was an elected official, once again, I'm not sure how that helps him in a Democratic primary.
You think that's going to be a pretty effective hit on him, whether it's Biden, Warren, or now, granted, Warren was a Republican privately, I guess, before she got into public life. Have you been at all concerned about that hit on her?
No, I was a Republican back in that era, too. Believe it or not. So people have their own journeys. They come to see the light in their own way. And the fact is that even when she was a Republican, if you read her writings and her public sayings, she was actually pretty left of center already. She was a Massachusetts Republican, which is a very, very different beast than a Washington Republican nowadays.
Let me ask you
by the
about...
way, I was going to say...
Go ahead.
There's no need to hit Bloomberg. I don't think he's going to be relevant in his campampign. He's not going to be in any of the debates. Right. So we're going to talk about him for a week, then we're going to forget, just like we did Schultz. Fair
enough. You forgot his first name, guy. Too. I know. Right. I know what you were about to do. You were about to say another name of Schultz, I think, but it's Howard Schultz. We go with the Ed Schultz by accident, too, sometimes. I get that. Former MSNBC or the late Ed Schultz. Let me ask you this about Medicare for All versus Obamacare, the politics of it. Let's set aside, I want to talk about the politics of it. You saw those results in Kentucky. You know this. Protecting Obamacare, advocating for the protection of Obamacare works in every county in this country. Are you at all concerned that Medicare for All hurts the Democratic messaging on health care?
So objectively, Medicare for All absolutely polls worse than Obamacare does. People are afraid of the unknown. But one thing we've learned is that when Democrats show leadership on key issues, that public opinion can shift, just like we did with impeachment. Impeachment wasn't popular until Nancy Pelosi said she was pro-impeachment. Now, there is a debate in this primary that's going to heavily focused on that Medicare for all versus just status quo, protecting what we have now. And that's up to the voters to decide. I'm not going to pretend that Warren has the upper hand here on the numbers, but she has a very coherent argument for it. It actually dovetails very nicely to her entire sort of theory of the case, the reason she's running, and it makes her consistent internally. Now, whether that's going to be powerful enough to help her win the nomination, I guess that's up to the voters to decide.
That's the voters.
So far though, Bernie and her, who are arguing for the most systemic change in healthcare, combined have pretty much half of the primary support. So it's not maybe a dominant majority issue, but it's definitely a 50-50 issue. So it's a real debate inside our party.
I think that's a fair way to put it. We've seen that even in the in many of a primary poll. Markos Moulitsas, always a pleasure to get your point of view. Thank you for coming on and sharing it with us.
Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel, so thank you. Now do me a favor. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Meet the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, you don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP, and the Meet the Press mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.